And heads up, today's session might get a little bit controversial because we are using some problematic terms which can be quite polarizing, but there is a reason for why we're using them, just so we understand. Because I've already had some people message me privately saying, I don't like how you worded this event. I'm like, it's intentional, so watch it first and then tell me what you think. Welcome, everyone. My name is Nat, and this is Exceptional Individuals. Every single week, we deliver edutainment webinars on neurodiversity to teach people in a more detailed idea about what it means to be neurodiverse, because quite often we're slapped with a label and told to live with it, but no one really kind of breaks it down. What does it mean for you? What is it around society? And this brings me on to this session, which is a really interesting one. We're talking about the burden on society. Now, already that is a really like alarm bells, right? I mean, before you get your like pitchforks and torches out, I'm not saying it's a burden, but does society think it's a burden? And also, how much does it cost us? You know, is neurodiversity more value to society than negative? Now, while it is Neurodiversity Celebration Week, in hindsight, this wasn't the best session to deliver, but we're doing it now. And we are going to do the opposite of focusing on the strengths. Because while there are many strengths of being neurodiverse, the challenges are very real, or a lot of us wouldn't be seeking support. So we are going to be kind of diving deep into what impact does it have on the individual? How do we know if someone with autism has a good quality life, for example? We're also going to be talking about how it affects the carer, if there is one, and people in general. So with a nice introduction, I think we can get started into it. And let's keep this nice and friendly and engaging. So while today we are focusing on neurodiversity, which is just all different ways of thinking, we're going to be narrowing it down a bit more into dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, and ADHD, more with a focus on autism today, because arguably it might have a more significant impact when, at least when it comes to people who aren't neurodiverse, supporting neurodiverse people. But a lot of this will be able to be applied across the spectrum. Now, here's our lovely team. I'm over here. I had to crop some people out, so I am sorry for those people in the team. But oh well, we're a social enterprise that supports neurodiverse people. 80% of our team are neurodiverse. I mean, it might more or less. We're experts by our experience, but we're also hopefully qualified professionals. I'm currently doing my master's in neuroscience. And we do these webinars all the time. Not last week, because unfortunately I had to cancel. I'm sorry for those of you who were hoping for it. But the week before, we did Neuro-Stigma. What is this stigma that is related to neurodiversity? And I think this session today will really complement that session, because it will help explain why is there stigma, but also, was it ever justified? And we're going to look into that. So the social strain of neurodivergence. This is such a loaded subject. Societal strain. A strain is like a real weight pulling down on you. It is something which hinders society. Do you feel like a hindrance on society? I mean, I know I have sometimes. Nowadays, I like to think I'm an asset. But is there still some impact it has? In a world which isn't meant for us, in a world which wasn't designed for us, though we are every day seeking to make it more inclusive, the truth is it currently isn't inclusive. And the amendments that some of us have to make often go above and beyond. And can that put pressure on institutions, on governments, on families and parents? Let's find out. Obviously, all of this is up to personal opinion, but we are going to state fact as much as possible. So we're going to be covering broadly the following: the burden, if any, of neurodivergence, perspective on individuals and people around them. We're going to focus on autism, such as the characteristic, the symptoms, that sort of thing. The impact on caregivers, which is often an overlooked area. We're going to be looking at the personal experience of ND, neurodivergence. First person narratives. This is essentially when people talk from their own experiences, as I am today, being neurodivergent myself. We're going to be talking a bit about invisible disabilities, whether or not they're a disability at all, and a little bit about who and their definitions and statistics on disabilities. I know, is it a disability? Is it not? Classic debate. Today, more than most days, it is probably going to be looked at as a disability just because of the subject matter. But as you'll know from most of my webinars, I think it's a positive more often than not. Okay, we are also going to be touching upon the impact on our health and happiness. Can you be neurodiverse and live a healthy lifestyle? Quality of life. How do we even measure if someone is happy or not? Some days I am, sometimes I'm not. But how do we put that in quantifiable numbers? Measuring needs, happiness, self-esteem, abilities, all these things are somehow measured. And it's interesting to see how we, neurodiverse individuals, compare to the general population. We're going to be looking at some QALY and DALY. These are ways of measuring health. And also a bit about the cost and emotions and our productivity. Are we draining the workforce or are we adding to it? Does it depend if we have reasonable adjustments or not? So yeah, some really big subjects today. So please do get involved. Please do share your opinions, but also remember to be respectful, which you always are. So my first question to all of you, what area of neurodiversity challenges interest you the most? Is it the individual's perspective, how it affects the person, or is it more how it impacts society as a whole? No right or wrong answer here. It's just good to know what area I might want to focus on. Okay, 50-50, brilliant. You've made it nice and easy for me. Okay, we're going to focus on everything. All right, yeah, all right, I'll focus on all. Then everyone's a winner. So the question we're going to start off with is, how does neurodivergent personally affect individuals? This is a big question, and I know it's going to depend on what neurodivergent, what country you're in, but let's just get some ideas out there. How do you think it affects people? Now, this can be both positive, negative, or neutral. It doesn't have to have a particular stance. Okay, we've got stigma. Yeah, absolutely. Stigma is preconceived ideas that people have of you based on like repeated terminology or words or ideas. Stigma is a very helpful thing when you're hunting lions in the savannah, but it's not that helpful in modern day society. We've got, well, it can be, but not in instances. Mental health, society, the way they think, perceiving the world, employment, socially, manipulation, logic, yeah, all these things. Like I said, some empathy. Then we're not saying that it's overly negative or overly positive. We're saying it's a mixed bag. And that's what it means to be neurodiverse. It's having a different way of thinking and processing information. Some things are going to be catered towards that way of thinking. Other things are not. So if you care for a neurodivergent person, what's the biggest impact you've seen? Now, when I say care, it might be you support someone who's neurodiverse, family member, etc. So is it the emotional impact that it has on you or them, which is the hardest thing when you're supporting someone who's ND? Is it the financial strain? Is it costing you more money for having someone who is ND in your life than having someone who doesn't have ND? It's interesting that those with autism in the UK at least can get benefits, but say things like dyslexia and dyspraxia, I don't believe you can. So, you know, does some have a bigger financial strain? Social, does it affect your social life? Do you feel that you can be less open? And practical, which, you know, like, does it actually stop you from doing things? And please do not think I'm encouraging you all to like condemn your children or people you support. It's just about having an honest conversation about how of like the ups, but also the downs. You know, we're trying to create a supportive environment here. It's I know with my mum, like she really struggled with me. I was a right pain in the ass. I haven't changed that much, to be honest, but you know, it was been a journey. Oh, see, Danny knows that's true. Peppy says definitely emotionally and practical. Yep, it's a lot of the things. Like I know My mum had to put so much extra effort in the school system to kind of get me support, going to appointments, doing more kind of trying to get me to pick up on areas which I was lacking in, even though I didn't have the concentration span. So it really can vary dramatically. Now, this one is, are you familiar with first-person experience books? You may not be, but any of these, click any of them that you have heard of or maybe read before. And quickly while I do that, I'll read what Emma has said. I'm late diagnosed, ADHD, 27 autism at 40. My whole life has just been a battle for everyone around me. And you know what? That is how a lot of us feel, is that we do put added strain on people. Obviously, we're not appreciating the benefit and the different output and aspect we bring to them. But whether or not it's true or not, if that's how you feel, that the impact you have on people, then it's a valid concern. Now, some of these books are really interesting ones on how people who are neurodiverse have shared their own perspective on how society has treated them. So we've got Nerdy, Shy, and Socially Inappropriate. We've got Odd Girl Out, The Reason I Jump, and Divergent Mind. Do check them out. Or April has says, I started reading Odd Girl Out, but I need to get back into it. My parents own a copy of The Reason I Jump. Thanks, April. Yeah, I've read Divergent Mind, but I haven't read the others, but they are on my list. So a first person experience book is the author's perspective. Like Temple Grandin does a lot of these type of books as well. Insight into personal experience, thoughts and emotions, quite often like their memories and autobiographies, but they kind of give you a unique perspective on what it's actually like to be neurodiverse. If any of you are parents or carers of neurodiverse individuals but aren't neurodiverse yourself, I highly recommend reading some of these books because it will give you a perspective of a different age range, which can help you kind of prepare for when the people you support kind of get to that stage in life. This question is a wide one. How do you define disability? And I'm not looking for a clinical definition here. I just want your personal, definition. What would you say to a friend or to someone you care or love about what it means to be disabled to you? I'll be curious to see, whether or not these tend to be neutral, positive, or negative. We got a condition that impacts an individual enough to mention it. That's a good one, because though we talk about a big spectrum, there's a lot of people who have dyslexia, for example, that may never mention it because for them, it doesn't affect them enough to warrant mentioning it, even though they are still dyslexic. Where other people, for instance, it affects them a great deal, so they do mention it in order to hopefully receive support or a bit of empathy. It affects how I perceive the world around me and interact with others. I like that one a lot, how you interact with other people. Often, the biggest thing about disabilities is interacting with the world around us. A difference that affects the way you live your life, something that affects your daily life that you have to work around. Yes, a disability is often something which affects you every single day or for long term. If you're just feeling a bit down one day, not a disability. If you feel down every single day, even for no perceived reason, then that is a disability because it is affecting you and you interfering with how you interact with the world around you. The way that societal barriers limit my potential, yes, absolutely. Maybe you feel that you are less likely to get a job or getting a salary that pays well, or maybe finding a family. All these things can have a massive impact. Adjustments, vice versa. Yeah, all of these are really great definitions. Now, here is how sorry, I love saying who, it just reminds me of an owl, how the World Health Organization defines disability. Disability is a complex phenomena reflecting an interaction between features of a person's body and features of society in which he or she lives. Yeah, so what it's saying is disabilities is a complex concept arising from interaction. I mean, it's quite a kind of stale version, but it's mainly saying it is part of the body, and I assume that also includes the mind and also societies. So it's kind of two approaches. Now, which of these are true or false? And these come from WHO, by the way, so hopefully legit. 1 billion people globally experience disability. True or false? Half of people with disabilities can't afford healthcare. True or false? And you are 4 times more likely to be treated badly in the healthcare system if you have a disability. True or false? I'm a bit scared of finding the answers of these ones because I have a feeling we're probably not going to like them. Oh, okay. So the first one is true, and the others say they're not, but they might be. Actually, I'm going to investigate that one, actually. I'm not convinced. But apparently, I think...
Hi, Nat. It's Fazana. Hi.
Hi, yeah. Great to have you, Fazana.
Thank you. I think it's the last one. You're 4 times likely to be treated less favorably in the healthcare system. Because people don't understand you. You think, I think a lot of people got used to more disabilities, and I don't think people are not very understanding and caring.
You raised some really good points, and I was recently in the health system for a while, and I tell you what, the nurses are lovely, but they are overstretched, and they do not have the time they need to support people who have additional needs. Rebecca says you thought it'd be more than 1 billion. I mean, with all these things, they're a very conservative estimate. With these things, they're mostly always underrepresented. The next question to pose to all of you, to really get your minds thinking, how do we measure the impact on ND on an individual? This is a lot more difficult. Maybe this is referring to yourself or others. Obviously, you can tell me if things are difficult or easy, but how do we quantifiably measure it? Now, this is something that we've been doing a lot at EI recently, is saying it's all well and good saying something, but how do we back it up with data? And that got me thinking, how do we back up the impact that neurodiverse has? Because it's very easy if you say you've got dyslexia and someone says, that's not a real disability, that doesn't matter. Or ADHD, don't worry about it. But to really show people, to give them a sense of empathy, which is hard to do when you're just saying it's tough, to give them some numbers can really help kind of reaffirm that this is something which needs to be taken into consideration, which does need help. Like, I'm always like, did you know 1 in 7 people are neurodiverse? And people are like, what? And it kind of gets people thinking about how prevalent it is. But without that number, if I just say, a lot of people think different, they're like, cool, man. No one seems to care. So let's see what some of your answers are. We've got, I don't think you can. Support needs are quantifiable, but they don't reflect impact. That's a good one. It depends on how much support an ND individual needs. Yes, we're all different, some things more than others. There are too many variables, but if the person is happy and functioning, how do we measure happiness? Employment level. Oh, how do we measure the impact? Nice. Are you achieving as much as you could achieve? How do you know how much you could achieve? A personal workplace needs assessment. Yeah, that's also a really good one. I mean, none of these are perfect, but they're all definitely a good starting point. There are tools, but how is it appropriate and accurate? Yes, and are these tools created for people who are neurodiverse? Because often these tools which measure intelligence or kind of health, well-being, happiness, they weren't created with different minds in mind. So can we trust them? Now, the Centre for Disease Control and Prevention, bear in mind, I don't really like that we come under the Centre for Disease Control and Prevention. That doesn't sound great. It sounds like we're a rat. But moving on, it says health is one of the important domains of overall quality of life. So health is really important. And you know what? A lot of people who are insanely wealthy always say the same, money can get you so far, but health is the thing which is absolutely priceless. There are other domains as well. So while health is the number one, there are other things which constitute happiness. And could be your job. Is it fulfilling? Do you like it? Can you afford to live your good life? Housing. Do you live in a place which you like? Do you even have a house? School. Is it good education? And the neighborhood, are people friendly? Aspects of culture, value, and spirituality are also key aspects. So according to the CDC, these are things which we need in order to be happy. So as a neurodiverse person, do we tick all these boxes, or are most of them not even relevant? So now we have an idea of what we're looking for. Here are some of the things which people look for when they're looking for quality of life. And it's such a hard thing to measure. And again, most of these things were done from a neurotypical perspective, but let's put a different lens on it and see if it still makes sense when we're looking at it from our angle. So objective indicators, meaning we all have our own personal choice about what makes life good. Some of us like being at the beach, others like staying at home. Need satisfaction, are our needs getting met? That could be anything, I suppose, from food, friendship, anything. Subjective well-being, so these words are kind of like, well-being isn't it be anything. Subjective psychological well-being and related quality of health. Quite kind of technical terms, but these are the areas which people normally kind of look for when they're trying to say whether or not someone has a good quality of life. The classic argument that let's say you are able to tell whether or not your child will have autism before they are born. Would you still keep them? And that's a horrible question. And I'm sure most of us hopefully most of us will say, absolutely, I would never change my child. But it does bring the question, like, if we know that someone's going to have a really difficult life, is it the right choice? And maybe these things can help us find, like, can you live a healthy and fulfilling life? I mean, I'll tell you the answer. Yes, you can. But it does come down to society. So that's the key issue to me. Are they going to have a health problem their whole life, which is going to cause pain and agony? Or is it just society which is causing the pain and agony? And if so, that is something that we can actively have control over. Again, very controversial ideas, and I'm not saying I believe or disbelieve any of them, but they're kind of ones which kind of crop up during this research. So this question is, what objective indicator do you think has the biggest impact on quality of life? Do you think occupational? Is it the type of job you do? Do you think your job equals happiness? Maybe, working in a charity might not pay that much, but you genuinely feel good because of it. Or is it the income? Do you feel that you need an income that is sufficient for you to be happy and live a fulfilling life? Or is it living conditions? Do you need a house which is damp free, where people are have nice neighbors? Oh, Emma says that's already happens with physical disabilities. Unfortunately so. So most of you think living conditions make the biggest difference. And you know what? From living with bad housemates in the past, yeah, I could definitely say that's true. But obviously we can affect this in a much bigger way. Occupational, yes. Income. I used to always be, I'd rather do a job that makes me feel happy. And while that is true, I think it's a very privileged position to say income doesn't matter. For those who do not have it, it does make an impact. I don't know the direct criteria, but they say that money genuinely does make you happy up until a point, and then it plateaus and you do not get any happier or depending how much more you make. Yes, Emma says more money means you can move house. Yeah, it means you can buy a house. So these things, they do interlink. Now I want to see what needs satisfaction has the biggest impact on quality of life. So on this element, I want you to rate them. So if you think your esteem has the biggest impact, you write that as a 1. If you think safety and comfort, not important, keep it as a 4. So we've got self-actualization, esteem, belonging and love, and safety and comfort. I mean, some of them I don't kind of like the wording. I think they're a bit clunky, but let's see what most of you think. So to have the biggest impact on your life is having a good esteem. So I believe that is like feeling good about yourself or having a high opinion. Safety and comfort, feeling okay in your environment. Belonging and love. I mean, I'm an old softie. I think belonging and love would get the highest one. But I think, yeah, you got to feel good about yourself first, and then you can love other people, have an awareness of yourself, and then have a safe and it's hard, isn't it? I'm not sure I agree with this, but I also don't know what I would put instead on what makes the biggest impact. Notice how none of these are talking about disability. It's more about...
Can I add something?
Yeah, please do.
I think it's a very difficult one because I think 3 and 4 could be just, I don't know, the 4 could go into the 3. So them through self-actualization and safety and comfort are just as important.
It's really difficult.
It's a difficult one to put together, but esteem, self-esteem is definitely taught. I mean, if you think you're worth something, that's you are. are you worth? It's like, am I worth anything?
Yeah. You do
You
have
know?
to look after yourself first in order to help other people, as most people would say.
Yeah. And I think the belongings and love just comes slowly second into it. And I think safety and comfort, I think that's just as equally important as actualization.
Yeah, though it is interesting that this doesn't actually say self-esteem and it doesn't say belonging and loving of other people. So this could be esteem of others and this could be loving of yourself. They do kind of could be interpreted in many different ways. And I think it'd be very difficult in order to apply this to, say, someone with autism. Do people who think differently have the same need satisfations as neurotypical people? Probably, I don't know. Tom says, Schumann-Given's 9 need is a good indicator too. Oh, thanks, Tom. I'll check that one out. I do mention a few others, though. Now, Maslow, who's an academic, has this hierarchy of needs. And essentially, these are the things that we absolutely need in order to live the best life. So he says at the top of the pyramid, it's desire to become the most that anyone can be. Esteem is the second. That's having respect, believing in yourself, having a status, recognition, strength, and freedom. Then we've got love and belonging as the third one. Then safety needs and psychological needs. So these are like the things, like the bottom is the absolute foundation. So we need water and food to be happy. Then we need safety. Then we need love. Then we need to believe in ourselves. And then we need that kind of ambition to kind of, live the American dream. Now, you tell me if you think this is an accurate thing of what we need. So ideally, you'd have this first, then that, then that, then that, and that. If you have maybe only one and not the bottom, you'd probably not be in a good place or not that happy. I can definitely agree with the first one. Actually, it does seem to make a lot of sense. I'd love to know your opinions as well. But so how do we measure quality of life? And these are a few metrics. Tom mentioned Schumann-Given's 9 needs. I need to look at that one. Some other really common ones is health-related quality of life, HRQOL, quality adjusted life years, QALYs, disability adjusted life years, DALYs. Now, I've done these and I think it's really worth, if you've got some spare time, filling these out and seeing how you rank on each individual ones. Because obviously, if all is created fair, then you should come out, I'm quite happy on all of them. But I had very different results depending on which ones I used, and also my mood and the time of the day. And again, a lot of these weren't created with someone who has dyslexia, dyspraxia, and autism. So did that have any impact on the results? Was I coming out more depressed than I should be? Or was I coming out more fulfilled than I would be otherwise? Now let's have a little look on the economic impact of ND. What areas have impacted you the most? So what do you think costs the biggest financial part of being neurodiverse? Do you think it's the distress, the pain, and the suffering? And I know these are big, big words, but let's be honest, there's been times in our life where you probably have felt pain and suffering through thinking differently. And has that equated into a greater cost output, maybe from coaching, mentoring, medication? Stigma. Has there ever been a financial cost to the stigma you have received through thinking differently? Resilience of the state or families, and poverty. So do you feel that you are making less money as a result of being neurodiverse? All right, these are really, really interesting and really quite tough questions. We've got distress, pain, and suffering. So a lot of us feel that we have ended up spending more money for these reasons. Resilience of the state or families. So
Yeah,
that's that kind of getting benefits, getting family to give you money.
I think resilience on the state of families and the stress, pain, and probably go together. And then I think stigma and then poverty. I don't know, it's difficult. Yeah, it's a difficult one. It's difficult, I agree.
It is. I mean, I know in terms of the biggest impact that I've had on with my ND is probably on the state, because when I was younger, my mum got carer's allowance for me because I basically wasn't able to look after myself that well. So I was a financial strain on the state in that regards. I would argue I've more than enough paid back in the years since. But when it comes to poverty, am I worse off? It's hard to say. Would I have a higher paying job now if I wasn't neurodiverse? Well, maybe, but I don't think I'd have a job that I love as much. So these so many different factors to take in on what actually contributes as a drain on resources. What can you attribute to being neurodiverse? It's, people say, okay, if you have a disability, the government pays more money for you and you make less money. All right, prove it. And this is what we're really pushing today. How can we challenge these stigmas, these stereotypes? There may be truth in them, there may not be truth in them. There may be truth in them, but they might be nuanced, and there might be, say, it's not the individual's fault. It might be something which the rest of society has kind of created this self-fulfilling prophecy. Another one of these is the economic impact of ND. What areas have impacted society the most? So this isn't talking about a personal perspective. This is talking about the state, the government, community. So we've got social security costs, and I appreciate if you're in other countries, I've used American ones because that was the research I got this from, but obviously translate it to your own circumstances. We've got costs due to lost productivity and treatment and care costs. So in terms of do you think that the amount of money that governments pay for neurodiverse people is a large amount? Do you think that because we might take us a little bit longer to do things and systems and processes have not been catered for our type of mindset, do you think the organizations lose money as a result of having us employed? And the last one is, treatment and care. Though we have the NHS, unfortunately, it is struggling, and a lot of people have to go private or find other routes of care. And even if it is through a national health system, how much money does that take over the nation's purse? I mean, most of you think treatment and care costs, and we do know that healthcare is severely overpriced, but obviously definitely needed. Security.
I think how I see it, costs due to loss. I think there's a lot of work to be done on neurodiverse people. I think that education still has to be brought to people's attention, that there's more to being neurodiverse, and people don't understand neurodiverse people. I think they think you don't, because you don't communicate and you don't fit in the rest of society. Yeah. There's a lack of a communication gap. They think you're thick, and they think you're an easy target to pick on as an employer, as a colleague. It doesn't matter if you're a different ethnicity or I think you're a huge burden, really, as I speak to students in today's society. Although people understand autism, the word autism it's used a lot more frequently than it was. But I think employers out there still would think, most employers aren't very sympathetic. They just want to work. They want people to pull the socks up and get on with it, and fit the team. If you don't fit the team, they think there's something wrong with you. You're an easy target to be picked on, which we are. But I think they just assume that we're just thick and stupid, and we don't know anything about the law and the government. How any law out here. What our rights are. If something goes wrong, who to complain to. Just because we keep quiet, doesn't mean to say we don't know anything. So you are a very easy target. So to employers, most employers are not sympathetic, I'm afraid, and you will. It does impact on your workplace, and whether it's an office-based or a factory, but especially if you're in a small, small group setting, really, and it has an impact on you because you're a bit different and you get singled out, you get picked on for many reasons. It's just very unfortunate. It happens, I'm afraid.
Thanks for your views, Fasana. Really interesting. I would definitely argue that a lot of the economic impacts that neurodivergent people have on society isn't directly attaining to us, but it's more about the inefficiencies that a lot of these processes have. For instance, the NHS isn't well equipped to support neurodiverse people, so they spend a lot more money kind of sending us kind of through the system in order to find something that actually works because they aren't experts in it. In terms of cost for supporting, they might just throw some money and say, we've helped you, but they haven't really thought about what would help. They haven't worked with us in order to find the best processes. And when it comes to lost productivity, I'm going to put it out there, I would blame the employer, because I think they lack understanding of neurodiverse individuals. They don't know how to get the strengths out of them. So what they think is low productivity is often them not understanding reasonable adjustments that could support someone to be their best. ND people aren't worse employees than neurotypical employees. We are just different type of thinkers and processors. So this is something which can be ramified, but you need to get every single person and stakeholder on board. So in a nutshell, I know we talked about some big subjects today, and I really appreciate all of you following with me. I don't expect you all to agree with everything. Neither do I, to be honest, but it's really interesting to explore these areas nevertheless. So in a nutshell, what do we learn? We learned that neurodivergence affects individuals and loved ones. While we are not diminishing the benefits are everywhere, but there are still impacts. So let's not call it a superpower, because it undermines the struggles and the reality that a lot of people face with. You know, a lot of people say, just hold on, when you get older, it'll be easier. And truth be told, I think it is easier when you're an adult in some regards with being neurodiverse, but that doesn't underplay the challenges of adolescence and growing up through the education system, which just isn't designed for you. ADHD, we know, has various symptoms and challenges, which can make it really difficult in order to know how to help someone, particularly if you don't demonstrate the hyperactivity, because you don't fit that mold. People with autism often face joblessness, poverty, and stigma. I don't know how reliable this stat is, but I read somewhere that 40% of individuals at the job centre have a form of neurodivergence. Again, don't quote me on that. It was from some government report by a baroness. But either way, I do think there's a high percentage. We also know that caregivers face challenge. So we've also got to support individuals who care for those who are neurodiverse. How can we help improve their life, help them have more like stamina in the tank, and also give the best possible care to improve efficiencies? Personal experiences can help understand neurodifferences. So person-first experiences. Talk to us, learn from us, work with us, rather than saying this works for you, this doesn't work for you. We also know that disabilities can be invisible and they can affect everyone differently. Obvious stuff now, and I am preaching to the converted, but people need to know this. We also know that the definition of disability is very broad. And in some ways that could be a positive because it means more people are arguably protected, but it also means that it's so broad that it's hard to know where do we put our eggs. And 1 billion people have disabilities globally. This isn't a minority. This is a huge amount. And we should be designing our systems, processes, buildings, institutions with disability and neurodivergence in mind at the beginning, rather than just retrospectively. Or Anna has just said, I think at times it gets more difficult with age. I discovered that I am different, and finding out that people lose their patience with you more older you get. You know what, Anna? I do see that as well, because if you are still have certain challenges, when you're younger, people are like, all right, let's work with them. But when you're older, you should know better. So yeah, maybe it was too brass for me to say whether or not it's easier or difficult, depending on what your age, but I do think there is a change. It doesn't stay that consistent. Other things that we hopefully covered today, if I was successful, is assessing how neurodivergence affects people using different methods. Some methods that we looked at, you'll come off really happy. Others will say you're totally unemployable. Others will say, you know, we need help straight away. Depending what like processes you learn really kind of shapes whether or not you're succeeding in life. So please do not use one metric, one personality quiz, one spiky profile to kind of dictate your entire life and to tell you whether or not you have a good quality of life. Quality of life includes many aspects like health, work, and home. You know, the way you think is just one element of how you live your life. it isn't the be-all and end-all. There are definitely other metrics which, as we learned from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, are way more important, such as, do you have help? Do you have food? Do you have health? Accommodation? We learned that there are 6 ways to measure quality of life, each with different focuses. I mean, it's not just 6 ways, but those are the ones that we typically focus on. Health-related qualities of life show how health impacts daily life. Again, not perfect, but it's something. We also learned there's different methods, such as QALYs and DALYs. I'm probably saying it wrong, but it sounds fun. Probably like saying it like how Borat would say it. And we also know that neurodivergent has economic impacts on society and individuals. We aren't denying that. All we're saying is maybe they're a bit inefficient, maybe we can rework them. And this is an area which is important because we know for a fact that neurodiverse people add to society and culture. We are fantastic for innovation, and this has been proven time and time again. But in order to get that juicy innovation, you do have to put some good foundations in to begin with, which is going to cost money. So as they say, you've got to spend money to make money. And I think that is very true when it comes to creating a truly neurodiverse society. Oh, that's a lot of talking. And to finish up with, as I always like to mention, if any of you are in the UK at the moment and are working and neurodiverse and you're like, damn man, this sounds great, but I genuinely do not have any funds or money or support to help me, well, there is a government grant at the moment called Access to Work. You can do it via exceptional individuals. We do an assessment with you. We find out how your mind works, what doesn't work. And we'll say, do you know what? I think this would be really great for you. This would really help. And we talk to the government. Oh, hey, yeah, cool. And then we get you the stuff and we help train you on it. It's not open to everyone, but it's definitely worth checking out. So do go on our website if you think it's helpful. Here are some lovely references to prove to you that I wasn't just making this stuff up, and it is a whole array of opinions, but you can check these out on the video once we upload it. And to end off with, any last questions, statements, thoughts, or opinions on anything and everything that we talked to today before we finish this week's webinar? And I always say to people, even if you have questions later on and they pop into your head, you're always welcome to get in touch. Do not feel that you have to say it right now. All right, thanks, Rebecca. I'm going to go next on the slide, but you can get back in contact later should you wish. Now, the next webinar we're doing is what even is mental illness recovery. We're going to be focusing more on mental health next week because the neurodiverse recovery, is nothing to recover from. There's strategies and support mechanisms you can learn in order to understand your brain. But what about the mental illness which normally co-occurs with being neurodivergent? We know if you have autism, you're more likely to suffer from depression. We know if you have dyslexia, you might have higher levels of anxiety. Those are things, though we cannot, or nor should we try and cure neuro difference, the consequences of living in our world are things that we can hopefully overcome. And this is what we're going to be looking at. So do check in. Just go on our Eventbrite, click this link here, and hopefully I will see you next week. Here's the contact details. My name's Nat, N-A-T. You can just email me at nat@exceptionalindividuals should you wish. But I hope you found today useful and have walked away with a different perspective and a couple little gems to share with your friends and family. Nice. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. And I'll hopefully see you all again soon. Bye, everyone.